Hi, if you've clicked on this video, chances are you're looking to learn how to track all your LLM token costs, not just for calls that involves the tool use, but even for those that don't. And the second thing that you're probably wanting to learn from this video is also how you can track what your LLM is doing at every call from a tool use standpoint. And today I'm going to share with you how you can exactly do that. Alright, so if I go to this spreadsheet, what you can see is there's two tabs here, right? One is the token cost tracker, and then the other one is the observability tracker. Alright, so if we look into token cost tracker tab, what you see here is the total cost, and then beside that we have the input cost and the output cost, and these are essentially the way that we can track every token that is used when we chat with any given agent on n8n, right? And this also includes the per token cost for the model that you're using. For example, if you're using a cloud for Opus, then obviously for any given number of tokens that you use, the cost will be more expensive. And then moving on to this tab, the function of the observability tab is essentially for you to kind of like track for any input that you have given to the agent. For example, in this case, we're saying use Perplexity to research about the sun. And then it shows you what is the tool that is used and what is going on behind the scenes in the agent for it to actually gives you the final output. And so this is the gist of these two tabs. And as you can see, these two tabs essentially gives us a very holistic way to track exactly what happens in any given AI agent node in n8n, both from a tool use standpoint and also a token cost tracking standpoint. So with these two things, now we can essentially use n8n AI agents a lot more reliably, especially in client and production settings. Because oftentimes when you launch an application at scale, there will be a lot of clients, there will be like the client's client that will be using this AI agent, and how you can then accurately track how much each client is essentially using, right? And so this is where you can give it additional metadata like client ID, etc., just to make sure that we are scaling this application in a sustainable manner. Alright, so as you can see, this is a pretty simple workflow, and where the tracking is happening is in these two spreadsheet nodes here. So here you can see there's a token usage log, and this is essentially what we use to track every single token that is being passed into the AI agent, and then the token used to actually provide an output by the AI agent as well. And then in log actions, what we're doing is essentially a way to track the tool use. And then apart from that, we also have this set metadata node, and what's going on inside here is we're essentially just giving in additional details about which session is this tokens for and for which client, right? Let's say your application is serving multiple clients and you just want to have a way to track for each client how much are they burning in terms of tokens, right? So that's what we're doing. And so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to try running the workflow twice. Once without any tool use, so I'm just going to say like a hi or something, and then after that we're going to use Perplexity, and then we'll see what's the difference in terms of what goes into the tracking dashboard. And for that purpose, I've also cleaned up, I'll just go ahead and clean up the spreadsheet just to make sure that we are starting a blank sheet. Alright, so let me just open chat and then I can say hi. And so as you can see, these two spreadsheets run, right? So we're tracking the token use, but on top of that we're also logging in the actions. And here obviously, like technically speaking, we don't log this action since technically there's no action that has happened, which you can see here there's no tool use. And so what you can actually do is you can always include an if node and then say that if there is no intermediate steps, which is where all the tool use is being logged. If there's no intermediate step, and then we can say, okay, we won't include or run this log actions node. So actually what I'm going to do is, let me just do that right now, right? So if I just go ahead and include this if node and then say intermediate steps, and you can see that this is an array, and so we're just going to say that array is empty if no action used. Then we can say, in no action used, we can say and just don't do anything. and if not, we can lock the action. Alright, so with that done, let me just try that again, right? So let me just clear this. Yeah, so let me just clear that, and then now I'm gonna say hi. Alright, so now you can see that it is successful, and you can see that there's no, it doesn't call doc actions spreadsheet now. And so if you just go back here, we can see that even after we refresh, we can see that the line here is still empty. And then if you go to token cost tracker, we can see that there's one more additional line now, which is where same exact number of tokens in terms of input, right? Because we're still saying hi, and it's giving us 143 input tokens. And then we also have the output, which is this, and then we have the total cost, right? So as you can see, like it doesn't call any tool, but we're still able to track like, you know, the cost of per run. Now let's do it again. This time we're gonna call Perplexity, right? So we're gonna say use the Perplexity tool to search about, to educate me about how it works. Alright, so as we let this run, let's just talk about like how we are making this happen, right? Because I think one of the issues that we have always been facing is that we're able to log the actions, we're able to see the number of tokens used within a single tool use, but then oftentimes we can't actually see how we can actually track a call that doesn't involve tool use. And we're essentially enabling that through this LangChain code node here, right? As you can see here, this is a GPT-5.1 mini, and this is very different from the traditional, like the traditional LLM node that we use, right? For example, OpenAI. This is very different from this, and essentially we're using this because it gives us a way to have a tool that can be connected to the node, right? Which is this token usage log. Whereas if you look at this OpenAI chat model node, it doesn't actually allow you to do that. And so that's why in this case we're actually using this node. And if you click inside, what you see is this is essentially a LangChain code node, right? So let me just show you what I mean. And so if you see this LangChain code node here, you can see that the icon is the same. And essentially what happens is this code node is essentially configured. We add the code, add input, etc., so that it kind of becomes this node that can be fed into the AI agent node. So just bear in mind that they are the same thing. It's just that it's configured to become an LLM node, and it kind of makes sense because if you think about it, n8n runs based on LangChain, and I'm not gonna deep dive into details about this, but essentially because n8n runs on LangChain, every single node that you're seeing here is essentially a derivation of the LangChain code node, right? Now, with that being said, if we go in here, we can see that there's quite a lot of things are happening, and let's talk about each step by step, right? So here is essentially just giving you a way to call the OpenAI within the LangChain environment. And then after that, we would give in an OpenAI API key, and with that you have the pass in process environment. And for this, right, if you are running on a self-hosted environment, what you can essentially do is you can just go into, let's say if you're hosting it on a railway, what you can do is you can go to the primary environment, and then you go to variables, and then you can just add a variable here, right? A new variable, and then say OpenAI API key, discard changes. Yeah, you can just go to OpenAI, like what I did there, and then you can just insert your API key, and then it will appear here. And the way that you would then invoke this within your workflow is by calling process.env. Then after that, you have to give it the model that you want to use. Now this can be a bit more tricky or a bit more troublesome in the sense, but I guess it kind of allows you to track your LLM tokens, so I guess that's a trade-off there. And the reason why I'm saying that is because usually what we usually do is we will use something like an open router, and you can easily just tweak our model based on whatever that we're feeling like at the moment. But with this, essentially there's a few things that you need to tweak. So you have to tweak this OpenAI to whatever provider they're using, for example Anthropic or something, or even Gemini. And then you have to provide a different OpenAI API key. For example, if you can see here, I've also even provided like an Anthropic API key because I wanted to use Claude Sonnet 4, right? And then after that, you have to give in the model, which is the exact developer name of the model that you're using. So for this, usually what you would need to do is to then go to, for example, OpenAI GPT 5 mini, right? And then you have to go here, and then you see that within this page, you essentially see this, right? And this is the exact naming convention that you have to provide to the LangChain code node. So you just copy this over, and then for the input token cost and the output token cost, you have to essentially you also have to go from this page. You'll see that there's the pricing stated here. So you have 0.25 for input, and then for output you have $2 per million tokens. So this is what the number that you provided, and bear in mind that this input token cost and output token cost are essentially per million basis, because later on in the workflow you'll see that here we actually divide it by a million. And so essentially this input and output token cost gives you a way to track accurately based on the total number of tokens that you have used both for input and output, how much would that add up to in terms of total cost. And then after that we have all these things here, which is essentially customizing your LLM token tracker to exactly your needs, right? So for example, here you can see that we're providing it. In my case, I needed the workflow ID, the execution ID, and also the client ID. But of course, you can add however many variables you want here that you need to add into your dashboard, right? And the way that you do that is by setting the additional variables in this node here. Then after that, you would also see this here. I don't think you need to make any changes here, but just to briefly walk you through what's going on here. Essentially, this is providing tools to this particular node. And as you can see here, we have Google Sheets, right? So this is the tool that we're providing to this particular node that you can call to log the usage and stuff. So as you can see, Google Sheet tool and then tool 0. And what I realized is that, or maybe I just couldn't find a way to make this work, and so if you guys found something about this, feel free to let me know. But essentially what I realized is I can only use one tool so far. Like I've tried, but I failed to kind of like put in multiple tools at any given moment and still be able to get like still be able to invoke it in this tools indexing. Yeah, so I think for now we can just use one tool, which is just the Google Sheet tool. And so what we have done above here is essentially we have declared a lot of variables, right? We have gotten all the variables ready, and then here is where we now actually invoke the OpenAI chat node. And so what happens inside here is we're just passing in all the variables that we've declared. I think one thing that I want to call out is in this section here, essentially this is where all the calculations happen for the token cost, right? So you can see that we're passing in the number of tokens both for input and output, and then after that we are also giving it the cost as well here, input token cost, and this is by 1 million, right? So meaning for 25 cents, this is for a million tokens. And so what we need to do is then divide it by a million tokens, and then we will then multiply by the input tokens that we have used, right? So this is how we do it. This is what is happening within this code node. Alright, so looking back at the results that we got from Perplexity, we can see that it has go ahead and educated us about how YouTube actually works. So you can see that, okay, explanation of how YouTube works across the areas you asked for, and then uploading and processing, etc. So what I want to show you is how this looks like on the spreadsheet, right? So we have two rows here. The first row is the row that we essentially say educate me about how YouTube works. And so you can see here that the input tokens is quite low, right? And output tokens essentially is just like how it is calling the tool, the Perplexity tool. And then after that, in that same workflow, as you can see in execution ID, these two share the same execution ID, meaning that they're in the same particular call. And you can see that the input here is a lot higher. And the reason for this much higher input tokens is because right now what's happening here is Perplexity has went ahead and do the research and stuff, and then this is where it is then passing the results of all the research back into the agent, and so those are all being logged as input tokens. And then output tokens is where the AI agent then gives me the final answer, And so for that, you can see that the total cost is also like a lot higher compared to the initial call. And then within this observability tab, you can see that, okay, so we have provided the input of user perplexity to educate me about how the YouTube works, and then output is exactly what we've seen just now. And then in between that, we have what it has done with the input together to the final output, which is the intermediate steps, right? Which is where you say, okay, message a model. What I've done is I message a model in Perplexity, and this is providing it this text, and then this is the output that we've gotten, right? So it kind of like allows you to track very accurately what is going on. And of course, if you want to make, this is obviously too much text, and it's not very helpful. But what you can do is actually to then narrow your results, right? So you can say, instead of giving the entire JSON for the intermediate steps, which is this, what you can do is just pass in specific variables that you're interested in. For example, if you just needed the tools and you want to know what it has, which tool it has called for each run, you can just say, just pass it in the tool, and it'll just give you this. So it's a lot cleaner and gives you exactly what you need instead of like a bunch of text, which becomes not very useful. And one thing that I want to mention is also how you can set up the intermediate step, right? So if you go into the AI agent, what you can do is you can say return intermediate steps. So just turn this on. And if you don't see this, normally what you see is this, right? So you can just say add options, and then return intermediate steps, and then turn this on. Then what you get is then like this object here. And another thing that I wanted to add is, if your main intention is just to track the LLM tokens, then I don't think you would actually need this node here, because I think where the benefit of this node really comes into play is it allows you to understand what is the exact tool being used. And so if there's something that's important to you, then you can add this node. But otherwise, I think this two nodes here essentially serves the purpose of tracking all the token costs, right? Because going back to the tracker, and as we talked about these two rows, essentially we are already quite comprehensively tracking both the tokens that we feed in, the question that we ask the AI, and then the question that the AI then uses to invoke the tool use, and then subsequently the tokens that is returned from the tool use back into the AI agent, which is this, and then finally the output that the AI agent then provides us. So as you can see, it kind of like tracks every step of the way already. And so yeah, if token tracking is kind of like the only thing that you need, then I think these two nodes will essentially be sufficient. So yeah, I hope this is helpful. Let me know if there's any questions that you have. Just drop them in the comments. I'll make sure to reply them and assist you guys with any further issues that you might have with this workflow. And if not, make sure to leave a comment in terms of what other workflows that you're interested in learning. And also feel free to subscribe to my channel if you're interested in more n8n workflows like this. And yeah, apart from that, thanks for sticking around to watch this video. Appreciate it. Have a good one.